great to have you all while you're watching. And I hand over now to Jaime. Jaime, I give it to you to come and share your story with us. Thanks, Jaime.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Alan. I don't know if you've got a bit of an American accent during that introduction there, mate, but it's very kind of you. Thank you very much. It was my dream, actually, to become a professional rugby league player, and more importantly than that, represent my hometown club of Leeds. I've grown up, I was born and bred in West Leeds in Bramley. But before then, just like to say thank you for the invitation. It's always wonderful to share my faith in Christ and my journey walk with God. I much prefer to be around people. You know, it tells us early on in the Bible that it's not good for man to be alone. Though we've all come accustomed to virtual meetings and Zoom as such, I do much prefer to be around and have that intimate out. In 2 theatre plays. I did a little bit of acting a couple of years ago. As far as I understand, you know, the only creatures God created that tell stories are human beings, and life's a narrative. Human beings are on animals on planet that tell each other stories in life, entertain, educate, and inspire us. And I thought to myself, I quite like the theatre, and I became a board member of the local theatre company, and I ended up in 2 theatre plays. One was called Playing the Joker, which was about the late great Eddie Waring, who was a BBC commentator, and the other one was called Leeds Lads, which was about the Battle of the Somme. And one of them was on the theatre, so he was on stage, and it was a very stereotypical method in which to perform. But the other one, the Playing the Joker, was in the round. So when you was acting, you was surrounded by the audience. You was in a community club. You could have been in somebody's front room, any venue that was large enough to accommodate. And it become really clear then that the best part about communication is the actual intimacy about being around people. That being said, we have got the advantage of being able to speak to those on the other side of the world, so it's a pleasure to be able to tell my story to you as well. And I am a rugby league player, and unless you're from the north of England, you might not know what rugby league is all about. You know, the vast majority of rugby players would probably be rugby union players, which was the original game. Rugby league was born out of rugby union in 1895 out of the north, out of poverty and rebellion, essentially. I won't go into that. That's time for another day. But as Alan said, I'm an ex-professional rugby league player. I lived my boyhood dream. I represented my club for over 22 years. I signed for Leeds as a 15-year-old fanboy way back in 1997. And 22 years later, 421 games, 3 Challenge Cup finals, 8 grand finals, 3 league leaders, 144 different players. Later, I retired in September 2019 and went on to continue that journey representing my club as an assistant coach. Now, I'd love to log on next week and listen to the sportsman who's going to give his testimony. And it's interesting listening to people talking about drug addiction. I want to throw something a little bit different to you today. You know, drug addiction being one of those things that we obviously don't want to be in, and a lot of the stories that you hear when people give the testimonies and come to faith are through adversity. Now, there's a couple of reasons you have to bear with me why mine's a little bit different, because I lived my boyhood dream. I fulfilled my boyhood dream, and when I sit here talking to you now as a 39-year-old retired professional, looking back on my career, I have to pinch myself. You know, the journeys that I went on, the things that I achieved, the people, more importantly, that I met, and the lessons that I learned, some of them archetypal lessons that are very directly related to the Bible, and I will come to them. But even though I live that dream and I've got these accolades, and I'm not in any way trying to boast, in fact, I'm trying to impress upon you that even that isn't enough to fill that God-shaped hole at the centre of our hearts and minds. And when we look at the things that we try to achieve in life, when we set out quite idolatrously at a young age, which I'll explain a little bit later on, you know, we can chase things in life, and even when you achieve them, you know, to quote Ecclesiastes, it's absolutely meaningless. It's meaningless without God at the centre of it. And that's what I want to try and really impress upon you today. I'm going to start by screen sharing. I just want to show you this in pictures because it might give it a little bit of context for those who've not watched rugby league before. So for those who can see, this is a short video of me playing rugby throughout my career. I think I'm 1309, 1,309th player to have represented this great club, and I don't think there'll be many players within that time that's played with as many players as I have over the last 20 years as well. It's been wonderful, and with all the successes and some of the adversity as well, I think it's the people that you play with that you really treasure. That's where the real gratification, and being able to do it in front of my hometown fans in my own city of Leeds is been a dream come true, and it's been a real privilege. And 20 years in, nearly done, nearly finished, coming to the end of my career, it's been a wonderful experience.
Jamie Jones once more, through by three, brilliant shot, brilliant try from Jamie Jones Buchanan. Oh, he's blasted inside, and it is Jamie Jones Buchanan. But a short ball to Jamie Jones Buchanan for Leeds. It's one of the most popular beards in rugby league. General Moon, back it comes to Hall, inside to Jamie Jones. Jamie Jones Buchanan gets over for the try. Here's Jamie Jones, and he scores.
Been through as a player the golden era, the golden generation, and I've seen all sides of it. The ups and the downs, and you've got to be there for all of it. As a Leeds supporter, I'll never leave them or forsake them. And when I do finish, I'll go back out and stand in that south stand. So that was a little bit of an insight into my journey. You can all still hear me. Just give me a thumbs up if you can. It's funny, my name there, Jamie Jones Buchanan, you might all see JJB, that was the name that the fans give me. So in the world of rugby league, I'm known as JJB. And the reason being is because I've got the longest name in rugby league. My full name's actually Jamie Daniel Peter Jones Buchanan. My mum wanted me to be called Daniel, which is a nice biblical name, and my dad wanted me to be called Peter, which is another great name as well. So they banged it in the middle as middle names, Jamie Daniel Peter Jones Buchanan. And why that's a bit crazy, a bit of a funny story, is when I made my debut for Leeds, the kit man, the guy who makes the kit and puts the names on the back of the shirts, said that he couldn't fit Jones Buchanan on the back of the shirt. So in his infinite wisdom, what he did was he put Jones on the home shirt and Buchanan on the away shirt. So casual Leeds fans who were going to games are like going to away games going, who's this Buchanan here? He's worse than that Jones who played last week. We've signed some rubbish this year. But anyway, a bit of a daft story. 7 years it took me to get my full name on the back of my shirt. And when I did, I got my song, but again, that's another story as well. So this is just a bit of an insight in some of the trophies that we went on to win. And we became known as the golden generation, it might have said in there, the golden decade, because it was the most successful team in the club's 122-year history. But as I've sat down and obviously finished and retired, I've reflected on that career. And usually Alan will have heard me speak before about the adversity that I went through during that time. So things like not getting picked for the team, horrific injuries, the worst of which kept me out for 2 years, and a whole multitude of other adversity that can surround our lives in sport. And I always reached into the Bible, as I do in Scripture, for strength. Christ is the centre of my foundation of my strength. But some of those stories from Job to Jonah, right through to Christ in Garden of Gethsemane, these pictures, these pillars of fortitude and perseverance is where the vast majority of the nucleus of my talk came from when I was talking about my career.
He's coming. Jesus is coming. I can't wait to hear the trumpet call. He's coming. Jesus is coming. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord of all. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord of all.
So at the moment, I'm going to hand it over to Bill Ashurst. Welcome, Bill, to our Life Stories.
Thank you, Alan. Good evening, everybody. Can I just say it's an honour and a privilege to be here tonight, sharing a fellowship with each and every one of you, and to share the story of my life before and after the Lord Jesus came into my life. And so where do we begin? I suppose we'll begin at the beginning. I was born in this little town in the north of England called Wigan, and I was born into a non-Christian family, and my mum and dad weren't married, and I was the baby of 3 children. I had 4 children. I had 3 sisters, a lot older than me. My mum couldn't afford much, and I think at one time I got embarrassed going to school dressed as a Japanese admiral. But again, that's another story. But at the end of the day, I had an up and down upbringing. My mum was a wonderful person. Obviously, she was a mum and a strong character. And she looked after us all. She worked all the time. She had a job in the factory, and I had a sad time in my life, which I'll get rid of early doors. And I used to go and stay at my father's at the weekend, and it was a pretty dark time in my life. For a number of years, I was abused by my father, and I felt so guilty because of that. I took all the blame. I didn't know how to tell people. I was warned by him if I told people, and honestly, it was such a sad time. But you know, even at that time, as a young bloke, I didn't know any difference. Within 4 or 5 years of it happening, God came into my life and completely stopped that going on anymore. My sister completely stopped it, and it's very hard. It's easy to forgive with the Lord, and I have forgiven, but the difficulty is forgetting. And you know, I need prayer to be able to forget that time, because there is triggers that kick it off, and the devil has a prod and a probe, and sometimes he wins the battle by me going into depression. But at the end of the day, praise God, I got over that, and I started to get into sport. In fact, most of my life, until meeting Jesus Christ, sport became my God. And I was into football, I was into rugby league, I was into cricket, I was into every sport you could think of. It was an outlet, and I was an angry young man because of what had happened. And as Alan shared, which I'll share the number of times that I got sent off on a rugby field, I had so much anger. And a lot of the times as a kid growing up, I took the anger out to other people because I saw the impression of the person's face in what I was opposed against. But I went to a local junior school, and then I went on to a secondary modern school, not like the academies today. They were called secondary modern schools. And I weren't very clever. I weren't very clever at all. I'm not sure if one year the teacher said, "Bill, as you are, this other lad, Wilford, is the stupidest in class." He said, we'll have to have a test between you. So I'm taking this test to give us 20 questions. And at the end of it, he said, "Bill, you're the stupidest." And I went, "Why am I the stupidest, sir?" He said, "Well, Bill," he said, "look," he said, "for 19 questions, you've both got everything right." He said, "and for the 20th, Bill's put, I don't know." He said, "and you put, neither do I." So again, I weren't that clever enough. I didn't get away with it. You know what I mean? I was brought into, I was always brought up later on with a sense of humour. And I got into sport through school at 11-year-old, and I started playing rugby league. And at the age of 15, when the day I left school on the Friday evening, I had a job to go to on the Monday. And that night we played a final at Wigan, and during the game, some kid fell on my knee, and they took me to hospital, and they told me they couldn't put it in plaster. And from leaving school at 4 o'clock, I was in a hospital bed with weights on my leg, and I was in that bed for 18 weeks. And believe it or not, I grew 4.5 inches in 18 weeks. My man went berserk, bought me new pants and everything else. She couldn't afford it. But that was rugby league. That was a sport. But the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, when I turned 16, I met my wife, Sheila. Absolute diamond. I've been so blessed with that woman. She's a dream. She's a wonderful Christian woman. The experiences she's had, which I'll share a little bit later on, is phenomenal. And I met Sheila at a local dance hall. And it was funny, really. I was only 16. I know I shouldn't have been drinking, but that was the norm then when we were kids. And I was stood at the top of these railings near the bar, and I saw this young lady came in, and I fancied her straight away, if I could use that word. I don't fancy her. I fancied her. She was beautiful. So I'm stood at the top, and all of a sudden the police walked in. And I got to the hearing stage, and I'm listening. I'm giving it the earwig, and I heard her say, "Oh, I'm only 17. If they get me, my mum finds out, she'll go mad." So well, that was my cue. So I just shut down and I went to the side of her, and they were coming towards her, and I said, "Listen, Sheila." Well, I said, "Listen, love." I said, "If you kiss me, they'll walk straight past you." And that's how I met my wife, with a kiss and the police in the same environment. So it was that for fate. Well, not fate, for luck. Because she'd been a rock. She'd been an absolute rock. So I was playing soccer at the time, and I was having trials at Blackburn Rovers. Believe it or not, one of the players in the first team at Black Rovers Ireland at that time, Terry, was Dave Whelan. And I'd had these couple of trials, and I'd met Brian Douglas and I met Mike England, and they were great blokes. Had a chat, and the manager, Johnny Curry, came over on the Saturday morning after the trial, and he said, "I'd like you to come to Blackburn." Well, I was so excited. I didn't know what to do. I had no dad. I had nobody to help me, nobody to tell me what to do. So I came home. I thought, I'll go and have a chat with my sister's husband. And I was coming home with the news that I could be a professional soccer player. But I was met at the door by Sheila's dad with his news that his daughter was pregnant. So I gave up football, and we got married in February 1966. Same year we won the World Cup, 66, in a Catholic church. We proceeded from there to, we had our first child, our Carl, and we had our second child, our Graham, then we had our third child, our Kathleen, and that was in this country. And I was playing soccer for Ince Parish Church. And I came home one evening and I picked up the local newspaper. And a friend of mine who played rugby league with me at school had signed professional terms with Wigan Rugby League Football Club. And whether it be admiralty, admiring what he'd done, or big-headedness, I don't know between the two, because I thought, always did, that I was a bit of a player than Bill. So I thought, I'll give it a go. I'll go and play rugby. Well, I played 2 games. On only my second game playing rugby league, I was just turned 18. We played a team, believe it or not, at Adlington, a place called Adlington, another small village up north of England. And we beat them, I think it was about 134-0. So I couldn't believe when a scout from Wigan came to me and said, "Listen, young man," he said, "would you like to come to Wigan?"
He's coming. Jesus is
Please welcome Andy Kirk. Thanks, Andy. Over to you.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, so I'll just say I'm from the north of England. I'm from Leeds. I'm married now and I've got 4 children. But yeah, I played professional rugby league for 12 years. I mean, you can probably tell by my accent that I'm a Yorkshire lad. No doubt you've had my good friend on, Jaime Buchanan, before. So yeah, I played with Jaime at Leeds, and that's where we first met, and that's where our friendship started. And yeah, so just going into my story and where it all started, really. As a young kid, I had a passion for sport from as young as I can remember. I excelled at sport at school. And although I was quite academic, fortunately, if somebody had given me the choice, I would have done PE all day, every day at school, because I just love sport. And I got into rugby league at a really young age. I've got a brother who's a year older, and we both played for the local club from about the age of 6. So my dad took us down, and he played semi-professional himself. So it ran in the family. But so yeah, so loved sport as a kid, and that was my passion. I also loved fishing as well, which is something that I still do now, which is fantastic. But I just think it's worth mentioning that I didn't have any kind of Christian upbringing. I had no Christian faith growing up. My parents never took me to church or spoke to me about Jesus or the Bible. But interestingly enough, I always remember believing in God from a young age. I remember from the age of about 8 years old, I remember praying, laying on my bed and just talking to God. And I always had a sense that there was a higher power there that was good and that was looking after me. And now I know where that comes from. But at the time, I had no context for it, and I was quite not forthcoming with sharing that because my family weren't of faith. But I always remember that from being a young age. So just growing on, and when I got to the age of 11, as a curious young boy, I found my dad's stash of VHS pornography videos. And as a young 11-year-old curious boy, I thought, wow, what are these? And I started to watch these videos. And at first I was quite shocked with what I saw, but then, I started to think, wow, this is fantastic. I thought I'm learning all about sex, and I thought it was a great way. And I thought, my mates don't know about this, don't know about sex. And, I thought it was sort of, making me into a man, and I was seeing things that I shouldn't have been seeing. But the reality was, it was going to take a dark twist and a dark turn. But I found myself, after I discovered these pornographic videos, I found myself, when my parents would go out, I found myself, watching them again. And I just felt drawn to go back and watch the material and search for different, more explicit material on these VHS videos. Any younger listeners will probably not even know what VHS videos are, but obviously same as like DVDs now, but big clunky chunky things. But yeah, so I found myself watching these videos regularly, and by the time I got into my late teens, early 20s, I was watching pornography as frequently as every day. The reality was that I was addicted at this point, but sadly I didn't know it. Nobody had ever told me that you could get addicted to pornography. Nobody had ever told me that it could be a problem. In fact, I remember at school, at high school, it just seemed normal. All my pals spoke about it, and they all seemed to watch it, and it all seemed very normal. In fact, when I played at one of my first professional rugby league clubs, I remember one of the players brought in a pornography DVD, and all the lads were in the players room, in the players lounge, and one of the lads stuck it on, and we all sat around and watched it. And I say that, and I tell that story because that just shows you how normal pornography was in that environment and how accepted it was. By this stage, I'd signed as a professional rugby league player, and I was doing quite well. I'd made my way through the academy at Leeds Rhinos, and into the first team, and then I'd moved on to Salford. So on the surface of it, everything looked rosy. Everything looked like, this guy's, he's living the dream. He's got everything that he would want. He's doing he's playing professional rugby league, something he's wanted to do from being a kid. But actually, the reality was, under the surface, there was this pornography addiction that was developing even more in my life, to the point where I realized now, but I didn't at the time, that it was having a massive effect on my relationships, on intimate relationships, girlfriends I had. I became very promiscuous, and I was sleeping around, even when I had girlfriends, any opportunity that I got. And that was because of the pornography, and how what the pornography had done from me watching it from such a young age. I'd become desensitized, and I started to view women as sexual objects, rather than people with feelings and emotions. I began to look at women as just objects, just to satisfy me and my desires. And again, sadly, I'd say, you know, I never even crossed my mind that it could have been a problem. So that was, you know, going into my late teens, early 20s. And at this point, I met a guy who was a physiotherapist, and his name was Tommy. And Tommy was just really struck me when I first met him as just an extraordinary bloke, really. He was very open. He was a Christian, born again Christian, and he was very open about his faith. And I would say I met him when I was around 18, and I started to go see him regularly because if I had an injury, rather than see the club physios, I used to go see Tommy because he was so good at what he did. And my relationship with Tommy probably went from being 18 years old to the age of 27. And Tommy would regularly speak to me about his faith. He'd share his faith in Jesus, and actually one of his favorite subjects was the end times. And I remember I was just fascinated with his faith and what you know, when he talked about Jesus, that Jesus was coming back one day. And he shared with me his testimony about when he got born again and how it radically changed him.
Life Stories. He's coming. Jesus is coming. I can't wait to hear the trumpet call. He's coming. Jesus is coming. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord.